Today we are going to be talking about interest rates and how they actually affect the stock market. I am going to be going over NQ, not too much though, because we kind of are consolidating. I did take one trade yesterday. I'll post it up here in a second. But as you can see, I did get stopped out. Very unfortunate. It was a beautiful trade. Would have been plus 170. But it is what it is. Other than that, today I didn't take any trades. I woke up a little later. I was out all night at the NFL game. Go Cowboys, I guess, right? Fuck the Giants. But anyway, let's dig into the main topic today. So we're gonna be talking about interest rates and how they actually affect the stock market over time. This is very important to know because whenever you are looking to do something in the future, you can always look back at history and see how history repeats itself. Because any data from back then is very good to analyze the future of where something is going to go. So, for example, you can do like mortgage rates and interest rates. You can do, the S&P and interest rates. You could do the S&P and the USD. So you could compare these things over time and see how they fluctuate together, if they go up or down together, up and down with each other, or against each other. They all fluctuate in different ways. So it's definitely good to know this for the future. If you are planning to purchase a home later on, this would be something you can actually use for interest rates and housing prices. Right? When interest rates tend to get cut, housing prices tend to rise. So if you want to pay a lower rate, which is what you should be doing, you're going to have to take a hit on the housing price, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The only time where they were flowing together was during that COVID crash. And that was a great time to buy. I shouldn't have been fucking around in high school. And I should have stacked my bread in high school to buy a house during COVID if I knew that was going to happen. But you can't win them all. So yeah, now you'll have to take a sacrifice on taking a higher principal loan, but your rate is going to be cut, which rate cut, a percentage on interest is definitely long-term, is definitely 10 times better than paying a higher rate over time. Because it's 30 years of a 3% rate versus 30 years of a 6% rate. Let's say the housing price is $50K more. You got to take that 3% rate all day long. You can't have both now. Unless something like that does happen again. But anyway, let's dig into this. Okay, so at the top here, we have the Fed funds rates, which is basically the interest rates. And we're going to be going over what actually happens during the times of when they cut rates and when we hit recessions. Okay, so this is a 5% interest rate up here. And this is what the S&P 500, which is an index, basically it's almost the summary of the whole stock market. It gained 9.9% back in 1984 when they cut rates. Now, as you can see, this graph up here compared to this graph, they follow each other pretty closely. Very, very close, as you can see, right? We're pumping, and then we sell off because rates here were cut. Right here, you can see we're pumping, and then rates are cut right here, but market starts to boom. So this one flows a little bit differently in 1989 versus 1984. And then we take a look at July 95. It doesn't even correlate to this graph at all. January 2001 doesn't correlate to this graph at all. But now when we look at 2007 to 2009, which was one of the worst crashes that we had, so if you take a look at this 2001, we correlate with the interest rates right here. And then if you take a look at 2007, which was one of the worst recessions we had besides the Great Depression, you can just see we absolutely tank in the stock market. And now we are coming at a point, this is right here during the COVID crash, when rates were cut, right? And then we just immediately boomed back to all-time highs in the matter of a year. It was actually insane. A matter of a year or 2 years, it was actually insane how fast we've recovered in the stock market. I think it was about 6 months we were already at previous highs after the stock market bottomed out. 6 months to 8 months, I think we were back at all-time highs again, which is absolutely insane for a quote-unquote recession. But recessions tend to last, they could last as little as 6 months. They could last up to a couple years. Anything after that is usually depression. Now, we were talking about rate cuts a while back, not a while back, but a week ago. We were talking about rate cuts. What was going to happen? Why did they issue rate cuts? Well, most people, probably around 90 to 95% of people, the reason everybody thought they were cutting rates was for a political standpoint, which I thought as well too. I thought they just wanted to please the Democratic Party, because they did the same thing in the Republican Party. They cut rates right before election to, push the stock market higher. But after some digging around and talking to some people, I was able to figure out that the Fed is actually scared that we're going to head into a recession. So they're trying to cut rates now so we don't enter a recession. So it's not a political cut anymore. It's a recession cut. So my guess here is they're going to try and cut rates as fast as possible so we don't head into a recession. Because right now everybody's like, China just cut rates 2 weeks ago before we did. England cut rates not too long ago. A lot of people are cutting rates right now because there is fear of a global recession coming. This could be an aftermath after COVID. This tends to happen in history where we do have some sort of pullback in the stock market. Not actually a recession, but a pullback in the stock market. And it tends to mess things up later on when the market decides to overpump and it's overbought than what it actually is. So the Fed is scared we're going to head into recession, so they're going to cut rates as soon as possible. And since we cut rates now too, I expect to see a lot of other countries start cutting rates. Especially like China, they're probably going to cut rates more too. So we're going to see the stock market absolutely rally the next couple months. We're already seeing S&P at all-time highs every day. I think for the past 3 days, the S&P has hit all-time highs. On the other hand, NQ, NASDAQ 100, is slowly falling behind, but it's not reached its all-time highs yet. It should by the end of the year. But to me, it seems like we're just going to cut rates, and they want to pump this stock market as high as they could before we do get into a recession. Whether we do get into one or not, it's very hard to tell. It's so hard to tell when we are heading into a recession. Inflation does look good. I think it was 2.3%. So, the cutting rates is not a bad thing necessarily. We just have to see how many times we can cut rates before it'll really, really affect a lot of things. Like, we won't see any data probably for another month or two till we get some solid foundation data of how these rate cuts affected. Because I know we came out with PCE, with the PCE news. I think today it came out, PCE. What PCE is it's what is it? I forgot what it was. Okay, so PCE did come out today. It's similar to PPI here. Personal consumption expenditure. So it's similar to PPI, but now the Fed is actually using PCE and CPI. They used to use PPI and CPI, but now the Fed is using PCE and CPI because they said they're getting more of an accurate number with this. So today the forecast was 0.2, but it came out 0.1. So a little bit negative on the outside. So that is if it's better than the forecast, it's actually good for the USD currency. If it's worse for the forecast, that means it's bad for the currency. Now, what does that mean for the stock market? So the stock market and the USD tend to flow opposite from each other. So when the dollar's going down, the stock market tends to go up. That's the same thing as gold. That's the same thing as silver. When USD is up, gold tends to go down. When gold is up, USD tends to go down. Now we know gold is hitting all-time highs, 2,600 an ounce now. It's fucking actually insane. But this is very important information that you should know. Other than that, I mean, that's basically it. We just have to see, the future of where we are. I mean, like, we're just gonna have a whole bunch of news coming out. Like, none of this really matters. Obviously, it all matters, but unemployment and an unemployment rate, those are some big ones there. CPI is gonna come out. FOMC is gonna come out. This is gonna be a big week here. This CPI, PPI. This is mid-October, so we're gonna actually get some. We're gonna get some results there of how interest rates actually affected the market from this, and I'm gonna assume this FOMC meeting they're gonna be talking about rates. Not sure if they're gonna cut or not, but it seems like to stay out of this recession area, they are gonna cut rates. But we just have to see what they're going to do. But other than that, I mean, that's all I have for you guys today. So yeah, it's just this is something like you should know. You should know for your own personal use. Like, even if you don't trade stocks, I mean, it's good to manage your money properly. Like, when the stock market tends to go down, bond rates tend to go up. So instead of if you're an older person, let's just say you're in your 50s, right? And you really, when you're in your 50s, you don't want to take super big risks. So something like a stock can be a big risk depending what you are invested in. But you could just flow from the S&P 500 into bonds. When the market's doing this, bonds are doing the complete opposite. So when the stock market's doing this, smart money flows into bonds, which is all the big wealthy people. Right now, all the big wealthy people are buying stocks because rate cuts. What rate cuts do means bond rates are getting cut. So smart money is flowing. They've been flowing back into the stock market. Eventually, we're going to see a pullback in the stock market if we do head into a type of recession. You're going to see a lot of the big whales are coming out of the stock market because they're going to go into bonds for a year or two. And then when it starts going back up, they're going to take their money out of bonds and go back into the stock market. This is how the wealth keep getting wealthier. It's just called a smart money move. You flow from the S&P, you go into bonds, you go back into bonds, back into the S&P, and you just keep flowing it in a circle. And no matter what, you're beating inflation because the average inflation rate, it's around 2 to 3% per year. You might not think that, but it actually is. You can look up the data. It's 2 to 3% a year. People are doing is what they'll do is when the stock market is rising and rates are low, they're going to have their money in the S&P 500 or into stocks. After that, let's say the market starts to pull back and interest rates rise, what are they going to do? They're going to take their money out of the stock market and they're going to put it back in bonds. This is how the wealth keep getting wealthier. It's called smart money concept. All they do is they take their money from the stock market back into the bonds, from the bonds back into the stock market, and they just flow it in a cycle. So, for example, they were all in the stock market in these 4 years, in these 4 different areas of recessions. After that, after 2001 to 2007, they were probably in bonds because the stock market was not pushing all-time highs. During COVID, when COVID crash happened in 2020, 2019, what they did was they put their money in bonds, right? through this whole way down here. And then once the market was confirmed that it was going back up, they took their money out of bonds and they put it back in the stock market. And guess what? When the market pulls back again, they're going to take their money out of the stock market. They're going to put it back in bonds. But right now, when rates are getting cut, these big people with these big money people are going to be taking their money and putting it back into the stock market. Because guess what? When they cut rates, right? Most people know when they cut rates, it affects your credit card. It affects the mortgages. It affects, high yield savings account. But the main purpose of rate cutting is for all these big whales to take their money out of bonds and put it in the stock market, so it pumps the stock market higher. When they cut rates, that means the rate on the bond is going to return less of a percentage than what it actually was. So why would they be taking on a risk of having a less percentage gain when they could put it in the stock market, get more percentage gains, and still beat inflation? This is how they're able to overcome these different types of finance areas where people tend to struggle in, is because they can move their money around properly, smartly, beat inflation every single year, and return more than 12% a year. This is how the wealthy keep getting wealthier, by doing this tactic right here. So it's very, very important that you understand this and that you learn this for your future. Because if not, you're just going to be going day to day getting smacked by inflation. If you want to do that, that's up to you. For me, I'm not going to be doing that. But other than that, that's all I got for you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Friday. I'll probably make a video Saturday just so I could catch up from Thursday. But other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your Friday. Later.